Well, it's so fantastic to have you here today to start to talk about some of the opportunities and challenges facing the planning and development sector. Margot, I know you've got some really interesting points to make. Earlier on today, I spoke with Alice Lester, Head of Planning at Brent, to hear what she had to say on this topic.
Well, the opportunities around housing are that it's come up the political agenda significantly, I think, from all the national parties. It's significant at national, regional and local level, the housing situation at the moment. And I think there are moves towards enabling local authorities to be much more active players in the housing market. Brent's recently established a development company which is buying up houses for people on our waiting list. They're not alone in that initiative, but we are seeing a move back, I think, towards councils as house builders to provide council housing, and that's a real opportunity, I think, for people to get more proactive in providing housing in their boroughs. So one of the main challenges is around providing enough housing. We've recently had the government's proposal for the objectively assessed housing needs assessment, which has led to much higher figures for a lot of places. In my borough in Brent, the target will go up significantly. Brent's not shy of granting permission for houses in the right places, but the number has gone up, and that is going to mean we have to have a new approach to where the housing goes. The London Mayor has also published some new figures, and that approach from the Mayor is really to see a densification of the outer London boroughs, which will significantly change the character of some of the London suburbs. So managing that through the system with the politics, we've got elections coming up next May, well, that's going to be a challenge. The main challenges are resourcing. Again, planning departments in London find it difficult to recruit the staff. Obviously, the planning fee increase, which is coming in quite soon, I believe, will be a help to that if we can provide the planners to sit on the seats to do the job that we need.
So a whole range of issues there from Alice. The big one, of course, housing, the challenges and opportunities associated with that. Also, a big thing, a recurring theme when we ask the kind of question is the way you treat density, how you get those numbers, but also think about the design and change. A lot of change in terms of the policy context and indeed the way we have to work. Margot, what do you think the big challenges are?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest challenges facing planners today is really fear of change. Because I have to say, the business as usual approach is just not going to be sufficient, because business as usual doesn't give us a platform to innovate. And if we're not bold enough with our development solutions, we're never going to be able to take advantage of the opportunities available in London. Now, we all know there's a huge number of people moving into cities, not just in London, but globally. And that's a huge problem, but also a huge opportunity for cities. And if we take a business as usual approach, we're never going to be able to house people and provide offices and places for people to play in the best possible way. So we must embrace change.
We'll change. Jennifer, what are your thoughts? Big challenges facing the sector?
I think on the environmental side, one of the practical challenges is contamination risk. I think especially when you've got use of brownfield registers and increasing pressure on space, you get the use of sites which are potentially more contaminated. And there's a lot of risks there for developers in terms of remediation cost when the development is taking place, but also a future risk in terms of whether or not remediation will be required later down the line. And we've seen a remediation notice be served for the developer of a housing estate which was built on a former gasworks. And while that remediation notice failed on quite a specific technical reason, there's always the risk for that future liability to bite.
To bring you in.
Well, I think on the real estate side, there are so many challenges, but they could all be put under one heading, which is uncertainty. And we've touched on some of the areas of uncertainty, political, so not just local issues, but also globally, the global political scene and restrictions on overseas investment from China. You could also talk about technological challenges and disruptors, driverless cars, e-commerce, which is affecting the high street, and the Internet of Things, which is affecting how buildings are designed. And then, of course, there's the social aspect. We're changing the way in which we're thinking that we want to work, how we want to play, and how we want to live. And all of this is coming together. And the question is, how is real estate going to adapt when uncertainty is the new certainty?
So needing to embrace that change for uncertain circumstances and some real practical issues around some of the sites and meeting the challenges and needs we have. So we don't end on a rather gloomy note. Jennifer, what are some of the opportunities you see from your perspectives of environmental side?
I think air quality is a really interesting topic at the moment, and because of some of the failures of national government, and you've seen challenges from Client Earth on the air quality plans, which have been renewed, local government has been really active in the steps that they're taking in their areas to address air quality issues. So you've seen Glasgow's just announced a low emission zone. Oxford is really at the forefront of this and announcing their zero emission zone. And there's a real chance there for developers to show that they're really alive to that issue, both in the construction phase of their development, but also the impact that their development will have during its lifespan.
Okay. Margot, thoughts?
Yeah, well, for me, the biggest opportunity in planning right now is density. And density is really an amazing thing, because if we get density right and we build up instead of out, we can actually do things to preserve our city, like preserve open spaces and important view corridors. But density also allows us to make healthier places and safer places. For example, when we have a critical mass of people, we can actually start to afford things like public transportation. So we can actually build people homes that are very close to public transportation, which means they leave their cars at home. So inevitably they become healthier. It's also safer when we have a critical mass of people living together, and people start to look out for their communities and recognize their neighbors and look out for each other. And I think the final point about density and why it's such a good opportunity is that it allows us to bring together a really interesting mix of land uses. And I think the London Olympic Park is a really great example of that, because not only do we have fantastic sports and leisure facilities, but we also have a huge amount of redevelopment in terms of commercial and in terms of residential. So we've actually built a whole community there in East London, in a part of East London that really needed some regeneration, and it needed it fast. So I think if we can innovate in this way and build whole communities through density, we've got a great opportunity that we can take advantage of.
Okay, just staying with that point for a moment, so we can see some of the health and indeed environmental benefits. So if you're talking about locating communities nearer to transport, avoiding reliance on the car, and perhaps even then the air quality benefits of that. But obviously the question that comes with any discussion of density is, does that mean tall buildings, Margot?
Well, density doesn't always mean tall buildings. London is a very dense city, and we don't have only tall buildings in London. So often when you say density, people start to think of Manhattan, Hong Kong, Shanghai, and these are very dense places. But also places like Berlin are very dense, and there's not a huge amount of tall buildings in Berlin. You can get some very high, very sustainable density at building levels around 7 or 8 stories tall. Looking over at Greenwich Peninsula in London, actually, that's a very dense neighborhood at the moment, and all of the tall buildings haven't gone in yet, and it's a very walkable space. It's a very friendly space with really well-used open spaces that feel safe and healthy as well.
But also density doesn't have to be about height. Density can be a time thing as well. If you have like a shopping mall, it may be used for retail during the day, but it could be used for public purposes by night. So there's different types of density, and it doesn't just mean the physical density.
Okay, so the intensification perhaps of uses of spaces in the cities. Interesting. Anything to add there, Emma, on the...
Well, I think that if I was to talk about opportunities for real estate, I'd really be sort of touching on the things that Margot and Jen have mentioned, because I think the biggest opportunity for real estate, perversely, is the uncertainty, because I think that it's uncertainty that will drive people to change. So I think it's the uncertainty that will help people get over the fear of change, and it will make sure that in the future we question the way in which we do things. So that will mean looking at brownfield sites and actually thinking about how can we remediate them, looking at density, looking at modular construction. And on top of that, it's not just how we do things, but also why we do things, and also thinking ahead to the bigger picture, creating a better future, creating communities, thinking about air quality. And you've seen in the retail sector, customers are pushing on the provenance of goods, where are goods coming from? I think that going forward, users of buildings are also going to look at provenance. They're going to be thinking, well, what are the green credentials of the developer, of the building? And I think that this will all come together, and hopefully we'll be able to create something good out of the difficulties we've got today.
Thank you. So business as usual off the table, but perhaps some opportunities in that uncertain context too. Thank you so much for your contribution.
Thank you.